Hello. I think we are on. Just check this actually sound before we start. It's always a good thing, isn't it? Hello, hello. Yeah, I think we're all good. Oh, turn that down a bit. Cool. Yeah. Maybe just pop a comment in the box if you can hear me. I think I found the source of the mysterious sound issue from the last couple of weeks. I think it's because I had a new sound card, so I've taken it out and I've gone back to the old settings. So we'll see if that fixes it. Hopefully it will, and if it doesn't, then I may have to get someone to come and have a look at my computer and work out what's going on with it, because if it's not that, then I'm baffled. Hiya Mick, thanks for tuning in. You can hear me alright, can't you? Loud and clear, very good. That's good. Hi up Simon, Keith, Chrissy, thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, today I'm kind of just talking about chord progressions in their own right. This is a bit of it's not an exact science, but there's a few things. Once you've got your chords 1, 4 and 5 in the right place in a tune, or your kind of basic structure for your 1, 4 and 5 structure kind of sorted out, you know that, for example, a tune will always begin on its key chord, almost always anyway, probably 95% of the time. Pretty much all the time it's going to end on its key chord. And tunes always go chords 5 back to chord 1 to mark the ends of sections. And then you kind of listen through and you can usually hear if there's any specific bits where chord 4 needs to go, or in the case of Mixed Lydian where chord 7 needs to go. And so you sort of work out a kind of basic 3 chord framework for your tune, and that's kind of how I always teach people to approach putting chords in by ear, because I think that's the easiest way of doing it, and that way then you can take that framework and apply substitutions to it to come up with all sorts of interesting things that will still sound right with the tune. What is my tuning? My tuning today is standard. So yeah, E, A, D, G, B, E. Yeah, so within chord progressions though, if you think about, let's talk about a tune in the key of G major, for example. If you've got the whole tune broken down into 3 chords, just G, C and D, there's loads of substitution options you could take for that. I'll show you with the mode wheel here. So if we're in G Ionian, G major, we can substitute our chord 1 for its related minor, which is E minor. We could substitute our chord 1 for the minor, which is 2 above it, which is B minor, because any of the main chords in a key can always be substituted for the chord 2 below or the chord 2 above, and that's because either of those contains 2 out of 3 of the same notes. So my G could become there we go. My G could become B minor or E minor. My C, chord 4, could become A minor, which is its related minor. So there's C, and 2 down from it we've got A minor. And 2 up from it, it could become E minor as well. And furthermore, anytime you've been playing, if you're in a chord 1 section, you can also play chord 4 or something related to chord 4. And that means that there's loads of potential chord options. So if I just write out like a generic chord set in G, we'll have a look at what the options might be, and then I'm going to run you through why some of them in their own right might sound better than others. So we've got something like what I'm going to be having in my head as the kind of example tune for this is my old favourite, Out on the Ocean, just because it's simple. And then I'll give you another example in a minute with the Kesh jig that you can practice playing along with. So with Out on the Ocean, the simplest version of the chords is just something like this. It's just G, 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 Then you get to your 7th foot tap. 4th bar is always a whole bar of chord 5, probably 95% of the time. Then you go back to G, 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 G. Ooh. G, G. And then D back to G, chord 5 back to chord 1 to mark the end of your section. So that's a framework that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. So there's loads of things you could do. You could replace G with E minor or B minor. So I might do something like G, G, then I'm going to put a B minor there. And then I'm going to put, instead of this block of chord 1, I'm going to put chord 4. So C and then D. Now this is a particularly good sounding chord progression because G, G, B, B, C, C, D, D just makes a really nice bass line. Do you ever try tritone substitutions? Ooh, probably. I can't. To be honest, Sam, I can't remember what a tritone substitution is. If you want to give me an example, I'll tell you. That's one of those. It's one of those things where I'm sure I do. But yeah, give us an example, and I will let you know. So yeah, that would be a nice one because little bass lines are always good. Particularly if you're creating a bass line either like stairs or like stairs with small jumps in. But a bass line, if you're doing a kind of stairs bass line, then adjacent notes or thirds are kind of the biggest jumps that you want to do. So G up to B is up a third, B to C is adjacent notes, and C to D is adjacent notes. So that'll be a really nice little bass line. Another way that you could get that same little bass line, which probably actually sounds nicer, would be to play the first inversion of G there instead. So that way you'd still get G, B, C, D as your bass line, but instead of playing a B minor chord, which sounds a bit, I always think of chord 3 in a major key as being like a bit of a roadblock. This sounds like just a link up to C, and it makes the bass line work, but without being quite so stop you in your track C. So if I compare them, like G up to B minor sounds like... So it kind of makes it go dark momentarily. Something like that. G over B, on the other hand, is just a G chord, but with the G at the bottom removed, so that you've got the B at the bottom of it instead. And that goes... And so I kind of prefer the latter because it keeps it light, and if you started light, it's nice to keep it light. Anyway, on the subject of darkness, if you do go dark, if you go from G to B minor, what I tend to do instead is go from B minor to E minor, like this. And the reason why I would do that is because I find if you've done one dark thing, like substituted something to a related minor, then it's nice to kind of keep it dark. And so I tend to do it like that. Another thing, that leads me on to another thing that makes chord progressions sound good. As well as going either in stairs or in stairs plus the odd third here and there to make everything fit for your bass line, another really good kind of bass line which really works well is any chord which is followed by the chord which is down a fifth. So if I go B minor down to E minor, B down to E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So B minor down to E minor is a fifth, and so any chord progression which goes down a fifth always sounds satisfying to the ear. So if I go, here's that progression, we've got G to B minor to E minor to D. Like that. So I quite like that feeling of keeping it dark for a bit longer and then resolving it, because it creates more tension, and then the resolution from chord 5 to chord 1 kind of feels nicer. So yeah. What's this about tritones? It's a jazz thing where since the flat 7th and the major 3rd in a dominant 7 are a tritone apart, that means the 3 and 7 of C major are the 7 and 3 of F sharp minor. Yeah. Yes, Sam. Yeah, I do occasionally do that, but only very briefly in folk contexts, because if we're in C, do you know what? I don't think I would ever really do it in a folk context, personally. I might use it as a passing chord to get to F, I suppose. No. Yeah, no, do you know what? I've never really thought about it, to be honest. I mean, I do it in jazz tunes, but I've never really thought about doing it in folk tunes. And I don't think I would, to be honest, because it just sounds a bit too out there. I don't see why you couldn't, though. I mean, yeah. I don't know, do you? I'd be interested to hear if that's the thing you are doing. That sounds quite cool. I'd be tempted to do it with a dominant chord as well. It sounds better, doesn't it? Yeah, I think the only way I would ever do that would be if I was in the key of C, going from chord 1 to chord 4, for example. I might do it momentarily with a dominant chord, because approaching any chord from the dominant chord a semitone above it always works in folky contexts. Or something like that. But other than that, as a flat out substitution, like just get rid of chord 1 and replace it with its tritone sub, I don't think I'd do it, because it's too out there, I think. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, that's a little sojourn off the track. So yeah, that's two things. Moving in stairs plus thirds for your bass lines, that's always very satisfying. Trying to keep an A part going up and a B part going down is also an interesting idea, or vice versa. So here, if I wanted to do going downstairs, I might do G, and then I might play D over G instead of this one. D over G is like my chords 7 in a way. It's a bit of a funny one, you know. Basically, it's just a momentary linking chord, because this would become E minor then. So if I was doing going downstairs, we'd have E minor instead of this one. and we'd be going down to D. So G, something, E, D. Obviously the something should be F sharp. So I'd put D in the first inversion there, and that would just act as a little link from G down to my E minor. So then you'd get a kind of sad descending version of the tune. So that's stairs in the other direction, basically. Just going back to this thing about chords that resolve in fifths. A to D is down fifth, and we've got to get to D at the end, because that's our 7th foot tap where chord 5 really has to go. So I'll write it underneath this second line here. Here we've got chord 5 back to chord 1 at the end. So if I wanted to resolve a fifth to my D chord, I'd be putting A minor here, because A to D is down a fifth. A, G, F, E, D. And A minor is a valid substitute for G, because G is chord 1. You can put chord 4 instead of chord 1. And chord 4 in this case is C, and C is related to A minor. So therefore A minor can go in place of G, and that's absolutely fine. If I've got a round in fifths resolution there, I need to find a nice way to get to my A minor. So I could just go G, 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 A minor, D, G, something like that. There is, though, a way that I can resolve a fifth to A minor as well, and that would be to put in an E minor here. So that would give me G, G, dark substitute for G, resolving up a fifth and resolving down a fifth and resolving down another fifth. So that would be a much more satisfying chord progression. And this chord progression here, G, E minor, A minor, D, is the kind of bedrock of swing and jazz and all those things. It's the 1-6-2-5-1 progression. So in this instance we've got G, which is chord 1. Running out of space a bit here. So that's our chord 1. G's related minor, E minor, is chord 6. A minor is chord 2. And then 5 back to 1 resolves all the tension at the end. And that's the 1-6-2-5-1. So that's like the sort of most satisfying chord progression in a way, because it starts out in a major key, it introduces tension by making it go dark, it resolves down a fifth, and it resolves down another fifth, and then it resolves from 5 to 1. So that's like a sort of staple. I could give you some examples of that, like La Mer, da 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 da, etc. Or Blue Moon, da 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 da, etc. So there it is again. What else is it in? About 1,000,001 things. Yeah. So that's 2 things you can do. Stairs up, stairs down, and then going round in fifths. Always very satisfying. When you look at a chord, as well as being just accompaniment for a melody, is also a pile of notes in its own right. And a chord progression is several little melodies that have been piled up on top of each other, really. So if you think about G to C to D as 3 triads, if I just play the triads at the bottom, there's my G triad, G, B and D, and my C triad would be C, E and G, and then my D triad would be D, F sharp and A. So if I just, oh hey Pierce, thanks for tuning in. No worries about lateness. I've been inaudible for a while, so you're beating me. Yeah, so if you think about those three chords as three melodies, you've got one melody that goes, then another melody that goes, and then another melody that goes like that. And those three melodies are all doing the same thing. They're going blump, 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 like that. It's like it's like Bart Simpson with his cane with 8 chalks in it. You know, if you do that with it, you get 3 parallel lines. And parallel lines are rubbish, musically speaking. Parallel lines are not what you want. So when you get into making chord progressions sound nice, you want to really avoid parallel lines if you can. So just playing 1, 4 and 5 as bar chords, you've got a lot of parallel lines there, and you end up with some pretty unsatisfying chord progressions in their own right. If you play them as tetrads, or more complicated chords than that, if I play a G major 7 like that, for example, and then I play maybe a C6-9 like that, and then I play D7 like that, we've got a much more satisfying chord progression because the top note is in common between all 3 of those. As well as that, if we look at the internal ones, we've still got our bass notes going 1, 4, 5, but then above that, we've got, on the D string, we've got that happening. So that's going down and coming back. And then we've got so up there on the G string, we've got that, which is, you know, doing something different. So we've got basically we've got 3 lines. They don't cross over each other anywhere, which is good, but they're all making slightly different shapes, and that makes a kind of expansion and contraction that is interesting. And when you listen to a chord progression, what your ear's really hearing is, emotionally it's basing everything on what the root note is, or what it perceives the root note to be. And humming along wise, what you remember is the upper notes within the chord. So if you have chord voicings with big jumps between the upper notes, they don't sound as good as chord voicings where the upper note is close together. So that's why in that chord progression there, I've picked 3 chords that have the same upper note in common. And that way, it's like a calm sea with all the action taking place under the surface, or something like that. That sounds a lot more rich and a lot subtler, but a lot richer than going, I think, anyway. So yeah, that's the thing to think about, is you want for folk purposes, you kind of want your root notes to be very clear, but your upper notes, the more you can achieve coherence between those, that's the thing that really makes chord progressions satisfying. One thing to think about with achieving coherence in the upper notes of chord progressions as well is there are some keys which particularly lend themselves well to use of open strings. And leaving open strings ringing sounds really nice and folky, kind of sounds a bit like Dadgad a lot of the time, and it also gives you some easy ways to play unusual voicings of chords with nice interesting extra notes for flavour. And as well as that, if you keep them in common between several chords, not only will they be easy to play, but you've automatically achieved a sort of gluing together of your progression that'll make it sound a lot more professional. So particularly if you're playing in the key of A major, for example, I like to leave the top 2 strings in. So you get things like this, for example, which is, I'll show you that one. It's a really nice, it's an A major 7 chord, but then you've got a B up at the top, so it's actually an A major 9. But basically, that's chord 1 in A major, index on the 5th fret of the bottom string, and ring finger on the 6th fret of the D string, and little finger on the 6th fret of the G string. and that's a kind of warm bath A major 9. So my main chords would be A, C and D. A, C and D? What a load of rubbish. A, D and E, sorry. And for D, I would keep my little finger where it is to get some sort of consistency. I've got my root note under my middle finger. There's my D root on the 5th fret of the A string. And then index finger on the 4th fret of the D string. And I'll leave those top two notes in there. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? I'm very partial to A major. I think it's the happiest of the folk keys, A major. But yeah, so that's that one there is a D major 7 chord, but then you've got a B and an E up at the top, so that's your 13th and your 9th. So it's a D major 13th, really, a D major 13 chord. But it's really nice because it's got that consistency. It's got 3 notes in common with the first chord, and it's also got some movement at the bottom, and there's no parallel movement in it, which all of those 3 things really make it all glued together nicely. And then what I'm going to do for my chord 5, E, is slide up to an E7 like this with my little 7 triangle. So that's the 7th fret on the A string, the 6th fret on the D string, and the 7th fret on the G string, and then you play all the strings. And again, you've got your consistency at the top. So you can do some really nice, easy things there, but that feeling of consistency and the lack of parallel motion kind of makes those nice, satisfying chords to play together. So that's those. Doodly-dee. What else is there to say about this? Yeah, just going back to what I was saying before about chords in fifths. This example with the key of A major is a really good time to see this really clearly demonstrated. If I play, I'll tell you what I'll do actually. I'll put on one of my play along videos, and I'll play along with something in the key of A, and then I can show you what I mean, because it's a lot easier when you can actually hear it, I think. Let's see, what have we got in the key of A? Real, maybe? Ah, here we go. There's a polka in the key of A. That'll do nicely. If you're looking for tunes to practice along with, by the way, if you go on folkfriend.co.uk and have a look at the top right of the homepage, you'll see a little tab that says play alongs. If you click on that, you do have to pay for the full pack, but there are some free ones as well on the videos page. If you go on videos and free play alongs, there's quite a few free ones on there that you can practice with. And if you go on the play alongs tab, you can buy the full pack, which is 21, because I'm not good at counting, 21 play alongs which you can practice with. They've got on-screen guitar chords and a full write-up of why the chords work, and 3 different versions of the chords for each, and chord diagrams for all the more complicated chords as well. So there's loads of good stuff on there if you want to have a look at that. But yeah, this is a tune called Gare the Rigger, and I'll put it on the medium speed, otherwise it'll be a bit slow. I'm not sure with the current sound configuration whether you'll be able to hear it actually. I don't think you will. Oh yeah, you will. I just have to turn it up really loud. It's very quiet, isn't it? Oh, never mind. It's so quiet. I'll whistle it instead. Actually, sorry about that. I'm still working on the audio issues. So we've managed to get microphones working now, but not speakers. But I'll get there. Can the website accept dollars? Yes, it does. Yeah, I mean it should convert it automatically, Sam. I think it's done through PayPal, so it should be automatic conversion. I think. Yeah. So if I'll just play it through a couple of times, and I'll play some chords, and then I'll tell you why I like these ones and not other options. Etc. The really useful chord progression in there is this one. That, I think, is the most satisfying of those. And that's why I do it at the ends of things often. Not always, because I just make it up as I go along, but generally it ends up coming out at the ends. And what I'm doing there, if you look at my notes, it's just all the way around the circle of fifths. I'm starting from, we're in the key of A. I'll show you one here actually. A Ionian, there we go. So we're in the key of A, and I'm starting from a substitute for A, which is chord 3. You can always substitute any chord in a key for the chord which is 2 above it. So if my current chord is like a chord 1 section, I'm going to put F sharp minor there. And the way I'm doing it is with this nice simple little F sharp minor 7. And I'm leaving the top 2 strings in for consistency. Then from that, if you go from the bottom string to the same fret on the string above, that is always resolving down a fifth, which is the same thing as up a fourth. So 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Or down a fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've gone down to F sharp down there, and this up here is F sharp. So yeah, so I'm going around the circle of fifths basically. I've gone on my wheel, you can see, started on C sharp minor. If I go 5 down from that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you're talking about intervals, by the way, you include the one you start on. So if it's down a fifth, you're including the one that you began from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then I'm on F sharp minor. If I go down a fifth again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I should be on B minor, and lo and behold, that's the next chord in my little sequence. Down a fifth again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got my chord 5 there, which is neat because that coincides with where chord 5 needs to go anyway. And from chord 5, if I resolve down a fifth, I'm back on chord 1, and that makes everything sound nice and finished. So that's why that's a really satisfying progression, and it's also really easy to play and sounds lovely. So I'll run you through all of it again just to see it. So it starts out with a C sharp minor 7 kind of thing. And I've got my index finger on the 9th fret of the bottom string. That index finger is kind of resting on the A string so that it deadens it. Then I've got my next 2 fingers on the 9th fret of the D and G strings like that, and the open strings at the top. And then to do my fifth manoeuvre, I take my index finger off, move the middle finger down one string, and put the index finger then on the 7th fret of the D string. And this little triangle configuration here is really, really handy, because that's a minor 7 chord, and you can move it around anywhere to get different ones. If you put it there, for example, it's a nice solid E minor 7, which is really handy. But here it's on F sharp. No problem, Sam. Thanks for tuning in, mate. It's nice to see you on. And if you fancy tuning in again, we're always here Friday, 5:30 UK time. But yeah, check out folkfriend.co.uk as well. There's loads of good stuff on there. Thanks. Yeah, so F sharp minor's there, and then I'm going to use the same chord I was using before, but slip down 2 frets. So now it's a kind of B minor 7. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing to get up to E7, except that this time, if I take my minor 7 triangle shape like that, I've moved it now so that the root note under my middle finger is on the 7th fret of the A string, so that's my E. And this would be an E minor 7, and if I take the index finger up 1 fret, then it's E7, and that's my chord 5. So all together. Then I'm back to my nice A major 9 that we started on. So that's a really satisfying chord progression. One other quick thing about fifths as well. Bearing in mind that when I'm talking about this, we're only allowed to use the chords from within a key. But if you've got a big block of one chord, you can resolve to that chord from round the circle of fifths. And you can go all the way round if you want, depending how long you've got on that chord and how quickly you can change chords. You can go further and further back. So if I had a tune like our example at the start that we were looking at, where I just had a big block of G for ages, the first time I'd obviously start the tune on G so the listener knows we're in the key of G. But then maybe on this time, if I've got a G, I need to get to D there, but I could go around the circle here. So let's say, what would be a good example? Let's say I've got G there, look, and I want to end up on G there, hypothetically. So I'm going to resolve round the circle of fifths to G. So D to G is a fifth resolution, D down to G, D, C, B, A, G. And to get to D there, well, A to D would be a fifth resolution. A major is not in the key of G, but A minor is. So I'm going to go A minor, D, G, D, G. So with the tune, that would sound something like, I'll play the first line of the tune normal, and then I'll do A minor, D, G, D, G for the second line. That would sound something like, sorry, there's some children screaming outside my window for some reason. So that sounds something like, so that was quite functional, and that's just a simple example. I mean, you can do it, you can always do it. So if you converted all of this into being E minor, you could resolve round the circle of fifths until you get to E minor. So if all of this was E minor, that's got to be E minor, we want to resolve down in fifths to it. So fifth up from E minor within the key would be B minor, and a fifth round from B minor would be F sharp minor. So I'd end up with F sharp minor, B minor, E minor, D, G. So I feel like I've done something wrong there. It should. Sorry, it's because it should be F sharp diminished. Something like that. That one's less nice, admittedly, but In fact, I think the reason why it's less nice is because the fifths stop. So if it had gone A minor, D, G at the end, that would have been better. So let's have a think about if we wanted to go round in fifths to get to A minor. Well, it would be E minor before that. So that would be B minor instead of G, then B minor to E minor is down a fifth, E minor to A minor. So that would give us... Yeah, that's a lot more satisfying, isn't it? Anyway, so basically my point there is that going down in fifths always works nicely. If you've got a big block of one chord, then have a think about going around the circle of fifths in order to get to that chord. It might give you something interesting. It's more of a jazz trick in a way, and it doesn't always work out well in folk stuff, but it'll give you some cool ideas anyway. Yeah, as we've just discovered, some sound better than others. Couple more things. Going back to jazzy chords like tetrads and things like that, dominant chords resolve round in fifths. Chord 5 to chord 1 in a folky context, very often I say you can play like a 7 chord, or a dominant 7 chord, or an altered dominant chord instead of chord 5. Usually works well. So if we're in the key of G, chord 5 is D, and I can play D7 like that instead of the D, and that would make it want to resolve down a fifth extra, if you like. However, there are many places which aren't chord 5 where you've got a progression which is resolving round in fifths, and if you want to make it sound extra jazzy, you can replace any chord which is resolving down a fifth with a 7 chord. So if we take, let's take that little round in fifths example I played a minute ago. You just fold this in half. So I'm going to replace my chord 1 with the minor, which is 2 above it, and that's going to give me this nice progression: B minor, E minor, A minor, D, and that is down a fifth, down a fifth, down a fifth, down a fifth. And that means that every single one of those could, if I was feeling jazzy, become a dominant chord. So I could play B7 instead of B minor, E7 instead of E minor, A7 and D7, and that would give me a really cool thing which sounds like this. I'll play one line normal and then do the jazzy trick. So it's a bit more out there than the nice traditional. But it's quite cool. And it's a thing that people have kind of acclimatised to since jazz did it, and they've been hearing it for more than 100 years now. So I'm sure they'll get used to it. So yeah, that's a cool little trick to bear in mind. If you've managed to drum up a progression that goes down in fifths, then try changing some of them to dominant chords. Another thing is altered dominant chords. I don't think there's enough altered dominant chords anywhere because they're just cool, but particularly in folk music you can use them in some cool ways. So if I take my example there where I was playing B7, which is like this by the way, index finger on the 7th fret at the bottom, middle finger on the 7th fret of the D string, and ring finger on the 8th fret of the G string, and then I just left the top 2 open, and then I go to that E7 triangle I was playing before, then the same shape I did for B but down on A now, and the same 7 shape as E but now on D. Well, an altered dominant chord, if you think about a dominant chord, its magic is that it's got a flattened 7th in it which creates tension, and that flattened 7th, which is there in that shape, becomes the 3rd note in the next chord. So my my tense note, which shouldn't really be in the key. Well, actually, ignore that, because in this instance, no, I'm right. My tense note shouldn't be in the key, but it resolves to one which is, and that's a note in the next chord. So your note that's from outside of the key that you introduce gets resolved to a note that's a semitone away, that's within the key. And if you think about any note that's not within the key, every single note which isn't in the key is adjacent by a semitone to one which is, because there are only gaps of a tone or a semitone within a scale. So if you're playing one of the semitones between two scale tones, going one semitone in either direction will give you one that is in the key. So my flattened seventh there is resolving to the third in my next chord. And the same thing is happening there. And I'm getting this really nice little chromatic thing going on, and it's just really satisfying. Something like that. Altered dominant chords are when you get a dominant 7 chord, like there's a B7 bar chord, and you add literally any note which shouldn't be there, in the knowledge that in the following chord you're going to replace that note with one adjacent to it which should be there. So if I take this B7 chord and I add up the top there, I can put my, I could add that's the flattened ninth there, but it's, you know, here is B, so on the top string we got B as well, and a semitone above that there's a note which definitely shouldn't be there. But if we add it to our dominant chord, we get, and if I then follow that up with an E7 chord, you can see my ugly tense note there has resolved to that one, which is the fifth in my B7 chord, in my E7 chord. So adding altered tones is a really nice way to make cool, extra jazzy fifth resolution progressions, basically. So something like that would be a cool option. Another one that I really like, my favourite altered dominant chord, is this, which is a 7 sharp 5, because we've got our 7 chord as a bass, and then we've added a sharp 5th. There's the 5th, and now we've sharpened it by a semitone. And if you follow, so if you play that for the B7 chord, it's going to resolve to E next, so it would be E7 like this, but this is not a good option to follow that one, because I've created tension with this note from outside the scale, and it wants to resolve to an adjacent one, which is in the scale. So I'm going to play an E9 chord, where I've gone like that to resolve that tension there. And that works. And then I'd do the same thing there as well for the next two, and then go down to G. So I get like that. And there are loads of altered dominant chords available to you. You've got sharp 5s, flat 5s, flat 9s, sharp 9s, which are like a kind of weird combination of a major and a minor chord. Yeah, so you can... Actually, before I go on, are there any others? No, just those. Sharp 5, flat 5, flat 9, sharp 9, yeah. Yeah, those are your options. But yeah, if you play about with them, anytime you're resolving down a fifth, experiment with putting one of those in, but just bear in mind that whichever tone within that chord is not in the scale needs to resolve a semitone in the next chord. Yeah, it's a fun little thing to mess with. Yeah, that's about it really. So I suppose my main points are bass lines in chords are always good. The bass notes are always the most important notes in your chords as far as folk backing is concerned, because you're kind of sitting under all the other instruments, I suppose. So make good bass lines. If you can go in stairs or stairs plus thirds, that will make a more satisfying chord progression. So da 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 da, or da 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 da, or something like that, or da 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 dom. As long as you got your chord 5 at the end of your stairs, then your stairs will sound good. The next thing is chords are little melodies in their own right. So consider whether the voicings of the chords that you're using have got big jumps within their kind of interior melodies. And if they have got big jumps, think about whether there's another version of that chord which you could do which eliminates some of those jumps. A really good game that I like to play as well is to try and pick three or four chords and see if I can keep one note in common between them all. So like with, if we take an example in the key of G, I often use C and D played like that, so that I've got the top two notes in common. Or to take a bit of a more advanced example, if I was doing, if I was playing an E minor, I might play an E minor 9 instead of my 1 chord, and then I might try and keep those two notes, so I play maybe A13 and B minor 7. That kind of thing. So it's a good little thing. It's a good little game to play to try and keep notes in common if you've got several chord shapes together that you play together a lot. Other things, what do we cover? Chord progressions that go down in fifths are always more satisfying than other chord progressions. However, just be careful obviously that they do fit with the music. If you've got a long block of one chord progression, you can start on it and try going around in fifths, and you can also experiment with trying to go round in fifths until you land on it. That one sometimes will work well, sometimes not. So experiment with it. And then the last thing was this thing about dominant chords. They're really fun. If you can design a way to fit a chord progression that goes round in fifths into a tune, then replace all of the chords which are going to resolve down a fifth with a dominant chord or an altered dominant chord, and watch the non-jazz fans' frowns deepen. But it's fun to play with anyway. So yeah, that's about it for today really. Sorry I've whizzed through a lot of things today, but I hope it's been interesting. Oh, thank you, Brian. Yeah, has anyone got any questions about anything before I go? I'm going to have a think about this tritones thing. It's the thing that I've done before in jazz tunes. I never actually thought about it for folky stuff. Interesting point. Oh, thanks, Chrissy. Thanks, Yvonne. Thank you both for tuning in. Cheers, Keith. I'm glad we found the source of the audio issue. Anyway, I'll find a workaround for that so that we can get the speakers going at the same time next time. Cheers, Pierce. Cool. Oh well, on that cheery note then, I'm going to leave you all to it. I'm going to be in here making a video this evening because I haven't had time to do one yet, so yes, I shall be releasing the last part of the series about how to pick chords by ear tomorrow. That one's going to be about the two remaining modes which I haven't covered, which is the Mixolydian mode and the Aeolian mode. I might actually do them one at a time, I'm not too sure yet, but one or the other, or possibly both, will be out tomorrow. And as ever, check out folkfriend.co.uk, there's all my videos on there, and things like the Amazing Mode Wheel, and my various books, and the Folkfriend Practice Diary, Folkfriend t-shirts, all sorts of good stuff. Go and check them out if you're looking for useful guitar-y bits. Nice one, thank you all very much for watching. And if anybody would like to book a lesson over Zoom, I do have a couple of slots available at the moment as well. If you want to give that a go, just drop me an email. It's info@folkfriend.co.uk. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all next week.